At the time when we located Matt, we were already searching from basically the Canadian border southward. We had moved our deployment sometime around last Thursday. After the burglary, we figured we'd go further north and try to push down in the event they might be going for Canada. This was right in that search area. It was approximately 16 miles north of where Matt was shot and killed.
New York State Police Superintendent Joseph D'Amico yesterday talking about the apprehension of David Sweat, the final of the two prisoners, escaped convicts captured in upstate New York. Joining us right now, former D.C. homicide detective and criminal analyst Rod Wheeler. That means you analyze crime cases. You're not an actual criminal who does analysis, Rod.
That's right. Good morning to you, Larry. It's been 23 days that these two gentlemen have been on the loose, as we all know. And what was interesting and startling is how it all came to an end yesterday afternoon, right around 3:30 in the afternoon, when a single officer, Officer Jay Cook, who was a sergeant, 21 years on the force, Larry, patrolling all by himself alone. We like to call that a 1099 patrol, just so that the listeners know. That means he's by himself, and he confronts this individual that very closely resembles David Sweat. So now, Jay Cook had an option at that point as an officer. He could have waited for backup, or he could have taken on this guy by himself, putting his own life on the line. And as we know, that's what Officer Cook decided to do. He hollered out at this gentleman to put his hands up, to freeze, and at that point, David Sweat tried to blend back in with the tree line, and then that's when Sergeant Cook took two shots at him and struck him in the back.
Rod Wheeler, can you talk to me about how this came together just in the last several days? Because it seemed as though a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, it looked like they had made it, that they had escaped. Some of the reports you were hearing out of New York was that the trail had gone cold.
That's right. Well, you know that the law enforcement authorities received over 2,300 tips all across the country, some tips as far away as Mexico. And the most important tip came about 2 weeks ago when someone said that they had spotted these two gentlemen down by the Pennsylvania-New York border. Well, 300 officers were shifted to search down in that area, but then within a day, within 24 hours, they determined that clue or that tip did not pan out, so they reshifted their priorities back up to the New York area, close to Demora, which is really interesting, not too far from where the actual prison is located. And then that's when they started really getting some very specific clues, such as the DNA that was found inside some of the cabins. They knew that there had been some break-ins of some of the cabins up there, and then that's when the trail really started to heat up.
Okay, so let me ask this question. When they found Matt, he was ill, he was drunk. Is it safe to say with Sweat, especially talking about how they captured him just singly walking or 1099ing down the street, that he probably was not of a basic mindset, that he really didn't have the right mindset? He probably had lost it at this point after 3 weeks of being nutritionally deprived and out in the woods, to be able to all of a sudden, this man dug out of a jail cell, and now all of a sudden he's just walking down the street. That doesn't sound
strange,
sane.
Rod, yeah.
It does sound strange, and the reason is because, their breakout of the Clinton facility was so meticulous and so sophisticated, and a lot of planning went into that. But where the real breakdown for those two guys came is when they went out of that manhole, and Joyce Mitchell, who was the employee who worked at the corrections facility, she was not there to provide them with their getaway car. So it seems at that point, that's when they had to find themselves in the wilderness of the forest area up there in New York, and that's when everything started going downhill for them. What's really, though, interesting is how they were able to evade police and elude police for 3 to 4 weeks almost, just in that area, only 20 to 40 miles away from the facility.
The magic of pepper. Now, Rod, let me ask you this, because I cannot have you on the phone and not sit there, because this is one of the areas. Does law enforcement finally get a pat on the back, get a attaboy, way to go, guys, you finally, do we get a PR hug for law enforcement based off of what's happened these last 3 weeks and how professional it's been handled?
I think it would be more than appropriate to do that, but I have to tell you this. Most of us in law enforcement, including Officer Jay Cook, we don't look for the awards. We don't want the accolades. All we want is to do our jobs like we've done them, like we continue to do them, and to continue to serve the community. So that's really nice that the community has applauded for, the things that the officers have done up there. But to be honest, at the end of the day, all we want to do, to be honest, is just do our jobs and go home home to our family.
Oh, I agree with you, Rod. But just right, I hate to say it, but you'll get the ACLU and some other civil rights groups who will be upset that you shot this guy. The cop shot him in the back as he was running into the woods. I bet you any money they're going to be saying that in some way this guy, this escaped con and murderer, that his rights were violated by the police.
Yeah, that's going to happen.
It's
We
sad.
anticipate that. But it's important, though, Larry, real quickly for the listeners to understand that type of shooting is a justifiable shooting. And the reason I say that is because the law is very clear. Anytime you have a known escapee from a felony institution here in the United States and that person is getting away, the law is clear that we in law enforcement can use the amount of necessary force to effect the arrest. That's the way that it's actually written, including and up to and including using a deadly force. So that was a good shooting.
Rod Wheeler, let me also ask you this. We lament oftentimes here in Washington, D.C. about how at the federal level, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the NSA, I forget, it's like alphabet soup, these things. They're just not talking to each other. They're not working together. They all have their rivalries. They have their egos. Seems like the opposite here between the state law enforcement, the federal marshals, and the Border Patrol. A really great cooperation, yes?
In this particular case, yes, it was. Now, initially, Larry, there was a little bit of confusion as to who was going to be the lead agency. And the reason you get that kind of confusion in cases like this is because by law, by statutory law, the U.S. Marshal Service really has the authority, the most authority and jurisdiction when it comes to tracking felony prisoners. But in this case, everything seemed like it worked pretty well. In most cases, it works well. And I don't like to sound political, but if some of the politicians would stay out of these things, then a lot of times you'll see they'll have a pretty good ending.
Rod, that doesn't sound political. It sounds like common sense, which has nothing to do with politics in this town.
Well, you look at Ferguson, you look at Baltimore, both of those cities where I was at during the riots, it was the politicians, when they got involved, things started going downhill. If the police are allowed to do their jobs, just simply do their jobs, we can do a very good, effective job and a fair job.
Yeah.
I know we get a lot of, pushback these days about racism on police departments. Let me tell you, been around a long time. 99% of police officers go out there each and every day. They put that blue uniform on. We serve everyone in this country. We don't pick and choose the calls that we get to go to. We get a call, we're going to be there to serve the community.
Well, that's the big question here. With everything going on, I think you made the point great. Law enforcement, they don't look for the accolades, but they've had a bunch of black eyes. They've been the scapegoat, and thanks to this right here, hopefully this might restore some of the PR that rightfully is deserved for the good of our law enforcement.
It is.
Absolutely.
And once again, we want to say his name again, Sergeant Jay Cook of the New York State Police. He is a hero today, and he did a great job. Thank you, Rod Wheeler. You always do a great job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, guys, and you all have a good week.